Ruth, thank you so much for being here today. I know how busy you are, but as you know, I'm very passionate about Enroll, and I want to make sure that the community have an understanding of why Enroll came into play and how it's developed over time and the benefits of Enroll. And so I'm really grateful that we have you here today in sunny UK. As opposed to sunny Melbourne at the moment. I'm being very sarcastic. I know you've been to Melbourne, so you know what I'm talking about. So can we begin by you introducing yourself to the community and your interest in the Huntington's disease area?
I'm currently working as the European Director for the Enroll-HD study. So I started in Huntington's research in 2007, so I've been in here for a while. I started working, first of all, at a clinic in the north of England in a city called Manchester. And really, very quickly got sucked into the world of Huntington's. I worked in that clinic for a couple of years, and then I was approached by the European Huntington's Disease Network to go and work for them, and that's pretty much where I have been since.
For someone in the community that's never heard of Enroll HD, are you able to give them a bit of a history around how it started and what were the main goals for Enroll?
The main aim of essentially facilitating research and speeding forward the pace of research in Huntington's disease. The Huntington's disease has a major issue, and that issue is it's a rare disease. And so, if you are a researcher trying to do any sort of research in HD, it's actually very difficult to get the numbers of people that you need to do whatever bit of analysis it is that you want to do. And that makes it slow. That makes it a very slow and laborious kind of pace of research, because that researcher's got to find the money, and then they've got to find all the participants, and it just takes a really long time. So the key point of Enroll is to essentially have such a large scale study and have all of this data and have all of this like these biosamples together that researchers can apply to do their research. And so they've instantly got everything they need, all the tools they need to do the available research. And by making that available to researchers, it really does speed up the pace of research. So what participants do is they come in every year, and they talk to us, and they provide information, and they if they want to, they also provide some blood samples, and we then make sure that no one is identifiable, but then put it in a essentially like a database and a biobank that researchers can apply to use.
I have noticed such a difference and such a progression in research and the numbers of clinical trials since Enroll HD has been in place. Could you possibly comment, because you'd have much more information than me, on the influence Enroll has had globally and some examples of those advancements?
I should probably emphasize the scale of it. It's huge. It is a behemoth of a study. So it has had over 33,000 participants globally, of which around about 23,000 are still signed up for participation. And it's been running for 10 years. So it is a vast repository of data. And it has been used for in any number of ways for research. So there's been 169 publications. That's 169 steps forward. But there's been a couple of kind of like really key things which I would like to emphasize, because I think that a lot of people might not realize the very direct connection between Enroll HD and drug trials. And actually, ultimately, that is what that is what the community wants. The community wants drug trials, and they ultimately want a drug which is going to make a difference to their lives. And really, if we're like being brutally honest, actually what we want is a cure. There are two types, kind of broadly, two types of drug trials, kind of in development or in trial at the moment. There's either symptomatic therapies, so drugs which are designed to alleviate the burden of symptoms, or, and there's probably more of these, and I think they're the really exciting ones. There are also disease modifying drug trials out there at the moment. And so, what they are is they could be a drug which either is designed to slow the onset of the disease, so that if it's given to a person who has not developed any symptoms, it would mean that they don't go on to develop symptoms until they're a ripe old age, and then it doesn't really make much difference to their overall kind of life course. Or it could be a drug which in effect stops the disease in its tracks. Okay, so if you have a drug that actually works like that, if you've got a drug that stops the disease from ever developing and symptoms appearing, then you've got nothing to measure. And that's a problem. So you can't measure the absence of symptoms, if you see what I mean. So you can't demonstrate that that drug is actually doing what it's meant to be doing by stopping the disease, because there's nothing to measure. So we have to look at alternate measures. And so that's where something called a biomarker comes in. So a biomarker might be something that, like a protein that changes, that increases over the course of the disease. Okay, so as the disease kind of develops and gets worse, the protein increases. So that could be something that you could measure, and we could see that it's increasing before the symptoms start in anyone, before like the disease is actually making a meaningful change to that person's life. So you've got something to measure there. It could also be a structural brain change that you can see through an MRI, which again, we know that they actually happen many years before symptom onset, before anything is different for a participant. So those are things called biomarkers, and they can be used in drug trials as evidence or as a way to test that that drug is actually working. And that's one of the kind of branches that has come out of the Enroll-HD data. There's been identification of a number of biomarkers which then can be used in drug trials.
So identifying those biomarkers through Enroll has actually been really important.
The people who are developing these drugs actually have the means to test them, they have the measures, then then it's just not going to work. And another thing that I kind of want to flag is the identification of disease modifiers. Um, so genetic modifiers of disease um, are maybe other genes that work with the HD gene expansion to have an influence on when symptoms may start in a person, and kind of like how bad the symptoms are, what type of the symptoms they are. So we know that the HD gene expansion is kind of like the main thing. It's the main thing that like causes HD. However, it's not actually the entire story, because you can have two people who've got the same number of repeats, but there could be 10 years between them from when symptoms start. So someone could start at age 35 and another person at age 45, and they've got the same number of CAG repeats. So there's something else going on there, and that is in effect genetic modifiers. So it's other genes that work with the HD gene expansion. So if we can see that for those people who the symptoms kind of occur early, there's this other gene, then that could become a target for a drug. That could be the sort of thing that the people who make drugs can think, oh, like maybe I can squash this other bad modifier, and that would delay the onset of the disease. So there's kind of like other ways that you could potentially treat Huntington's disease other than directly targeting the CAG repeat. So again, genetic modifiers of disease is a way, it is are things that have been identified using the Enroll-HD dataset and then can be used directly by pharmaceutical companies to develop drugs. So although Enroll is an observational study, if you come and you take part in Enroll, all you're doing is giving information and like doing a couple of tests, and you give some blood samples. You are directly facilitating drug trials. You are helping to make those drug trials happen.
And that's a really important point, and I've seen evidence of that in relation to the biomarkers and the identification of those biomarkers. So pharmaceuticals can measure the impact of drug trials, but also I'm really pleased to hear when you're talking about CAG repeats, because I've observed that in families where there are different CAG repeats and sometimes people become symptomatic at different times. So for you to talk about genetic modifiers also makes perfect sense in real time to me as well. Now, I had the privilege of attending the European Huntington's Disease Network meeting last year. I know there's some really important things happening in the Enroll space. So would you be able to sort of discuss, because I think you've given a really good overview of how it's developed and where we're at now with Enroll and the next steps?
There is a new version of the study, Enroll 2.0, and it is we're kind of we're deep in the planning phases at the moment. It will involve a whole range of new assessments, specifically focusing on the sort of changes that we might see in people who do not have any symptoms, or who are maybe in the very early stages of the disease. Because actually what we really need to help with these drug trials is more sensitive and specific measures to people in those very early stages. So that's where the attentions of Enroll 2.0 will be going, and there will be more ways in which we're looking at biological samples to try, because genetic research has just moved on. It has become infinitely more complex and more interesting, and the sort of things that you can get out of like analysis of biological samples are very exciting and interesting. So there's more biological samples, and there is also for a selection of sites there'll be an MRI component, so we'll be getting participants to go in scanners so we can have a look at their brains. So all of that data and information. So we're changing it all up. We're making sure that Enroll is fresh and it stays relevant for the direction of research as it is at the moment.
And I think it's really heartening to hear that you're going to include a part of the community that haven't previously been a part of the observational study and really want to be involved. So I think those are really positive news items to share.
There's one thing I really want to drive forward, is that we need younger people. So if you look at our current kind of population in the study, it is not surprisingly kind of clustered around people age 40, because that's the sort of age when people are starting to generally become symptomatic. We need younger people. And we need younger people who are, but like, because they are frequently many years away from getting symptomatic, or maybe they're just maybe getting the first few bits and pieces. And when we say young people, we're saying anywhere up to 40.
It's clear to me your message to the community, not only here but I'm sure globally, is it is of real benefit to you to participate in this observational study. That
Yeah.
the more people that participate, the quicker we'll be closer to effective treatments and eventually a cure. Because the more data we have, the more knowledge we have, which enables us to have more clinical trials and hopefully some successes. Would you agree with that?
That's absolutely the case. That is absolutely the case. And there's a kind of a lot of benefit of taking part in Enroll. So if you are interested, like maybe you haven't taken part in a clinical trial and you're kind of thinking like, well, maybe that would be something I'd be interested in. Enroll can be one way for you to try out whether involvement in clinical research is something that actually you like in reality, because clinical trials involve you going in like quite a lot, because you have to, be given the drug and you'll be like really closely monitored. And so there's an awful lot of visits. With Enroll, you just have to come in once a year. So you can kind of dip your toe in clinical research and see whether it works for you. If you are interested in clinical trials, and actually getting involved in Enroll will potentially help you get involved in those clinical trials, because the vast majority of the trials that happen globally happen at Enroll-HD sites, because those pharmaceutical companies and those clinical research organizations, when they are looking at where to run their clinical trial, they can see that our sites have the population that they need. They have all those participants. And actually the way that Enroll works with with sites and with clinical research organizations in drug trials is that, we allow our sites to use the Enroll-HD data to kind of very quickly see who would fit the inclusion criteria. So like the things that you need to have to take part in a drug trial. And again, it makes it a lot faster to recruit into a drug trial. So pharmaceutical companies, CROs, they know that our sites are very well practiced in research. They know they have the population, and we can and they can deliver. So it's definitely worth, if you're interested in clinical trials, in maybe trying out Enroll.
And Ruth, that's a point of frustration for me, because I've seen the evidence of that in Europe and in America. And I'm frustrated that that's not happening here in Australia. And my colleagues in the associations in New Zealand are experiencing the same problem. So what we really want to do is engage with Enroll. How can we help around the clinical sites? How can we help the community access Enroll and be a part of that? Because I don't know anyone in the community that doesn't want to be a part of clinical trials and not have this disease in their life.
Spread the word, talk to your, if you're in a HD family, talk to your family members. Please direct people to the Enroll-HD website, which is enroll-hd.org. And there is an area in that website which is called For Families, and you can read all about the Enroll-HD study and other studies that we work with, like the HD Clarity study. And you can also find the nearest study site to you. And when you find kind of like the location nearest you, it will also have the direct contact details of the site. So if you wanted to just basically talk to the site staff about maybe coming in and maybe like seeing what Enroll-HD is like, then you've got the telephone number and the email address of both the what we call the principal investigator, the kind of lead clinician at the site, and also the study coordinator, and they will be more than happy to talk to you about involvement in the study.
I can't thank you enough for giving up your valuable time to do this interview with me. I am sure people are going to watch this and want to be involved. Is there anything else that you would like to say before I let you run free from my presence?
We are in a very different place than we were when I started in Huntington's disease research. I was involved in one of the first phase three, like it's like a big like multi-center, like hundreds of people involved drug trial in Huntington's disease. And that was for fish oil. That was for the sort of thing that you can buy in the pharmacy or in your supermarket, but we were all really excited. It was an exciting thing. And we are so far from that now. There are so many companies who are interested in investing, their time and their research in Huntington's disease, and so many exciting, extraordinarily complicated drugs out there getting, developed and tested. I think there's a lot of hope to be had there. And I'm not one for kind of suggesting a false dawn. Like we don't know how far we are from the finish line, and that's why we continue to need to like to do enroll and collect all that information and kind of push forward the pace of research and the understanding of Huntington's disease so that we can continue to facilitate those drug trials, but there is hope. We just need to continue to kind of do the good work.
Oh, I think you've demonstrated beautifully how many changes have happened and advancements have happened since Enroll came into place. And it's such a benefit. Please continue to do the good work that you and your team are doing. Please thank them on behalf of all of us. And I cannot thank you enough for giving the time. I really enjoyed this interview. I could speak to you for longer, but I'm sure you would like to get back to your life and your work. But if you're in Melbourne, I'm going to find you and we're going to sit down and have another conversation. So thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you for inviting me.